I found my only son-in-law shivering on Christmas while his family laughed by the fireplace. After the meeting, I watched them talk by the coffee station. She actually laughed, at something he said. The sound hit me like a punch to the chest because I'd forgotten what my daughter's joy sounded like. Have you ever met someone who changed your family's entire dynamic? Hi viewers, kindly tell us where you're watching from and what time it is. Warm welcome to the family, enjoy the story. On Christmas Eve in Ohio, I walked into my daughter's mansion expecting holiday joy. Instead, I found my son-in-law Michael locked outside in the snow while his own family celebrated without him. The man who had saved our family business sat shivering on the porch, his wedding ring still catching the Christmas lights as his wife's laughter echoed from inside. What I discovered next about forged documents and a stolen inheritance in Atlanta would tear our family apart forever. Have you ever witnessed the moment love turns to betrayal? Have you seen someone sacrifice everything for family, only to be cast aside? Do you know what it feels like when the people you trust most become strangers? This is about more than a Christmas gone wrong. It's about how greed can poison even the deepest bonds. Stay with me as I reveal how one night changed everything we thought we knew about loyalty, love, and the price of forgiveness. Follow along as we uncover a mystery that's been buried for decades, where million-dollar lies hide behind perfect family photos. The truth about Michael didn't start that cold December night. It began 5 years earlier when he walked into our lives like a storm, beautiful, powerful, and completely unpredictable. Now, let me take you back to where it all began, to understand how the perfect son-in-law became the family outcast. What you're about to hear will make you question everything you think you know about marriage, money, and the masks we wear to hide our darkest secrets. 5 years ago, Michael walked into our New Jersey boardroom and did something no other man had managed. He made my daughter smile again after her divorce. Rebecca had been broken for months. Her first husband, some Wall Street hotshot, had left her for his secretary, taking half our business contacts and most of her confidence. She'd sit in board meetings staring out windows, her mind somewhere else, her heart locked away where no one could reach it. Then Michael arrived from Georgia for our logistics conference. Tall, confident, with this warm southern drawl that could make discussing shipping routes sound like poetry. He wore his suit like he was born for success, but his handshake carried the calluses of someone who'd worked with his hands. The Atlanta conference room where we first met felt charged with electricity. Michael's presentation on sustainable logistics wasn't just smart, it was revolutionary. His ideas could save companies millions while helping the environment. He spoke about efficiency like other men talked about sports, with passion that made everyone lean forward. But it wasn't his business mind that caught my attention. It was how he looked at Rebecca. Most men saw her money first, her beauty second. Michael saw her intelligence. When she challenged his numbers, he didn't get defensive. He grinned like she'd just given him the best gift of his life. "You're absolutely right," he said, leaning forward. "I was hoping someone would catch that. It means you were really listening." Rebecca blushed for the first time in months. After the meeting, I watched them talk by the coffee station. She actually laughed, at something he said. The sound hit me like a punch to the chest because I'd forgotten what my daughter's joy sounded like. "She's incredible," Michael told me later over dinner. "Smart, strong, beautiful. But she's been hurt, hasn't she?" Most men would have seen vulnerability as weakness. Michael saw it as something to protect. That night, Rebecca called me at midnight. "Dad," she whispered, "I think I'm going to fall in love with him." "Already?" I asked. "Already." The courtship lasted 6 months. Michael flew up from Atlanta every weekend, bringing flowers that weren't expensive but were Rebecca's favorites, daisies instead of roses, because she'd mentioned once that roses reminded her of funerals. He won over our family slowly. My wife loved his manners. My sister appreciated how he listened to her stories. Even our housekeeper, Maria, who trusted no one, started making his favorite cookies. But it was his respect that impressed me most. When some family members made comments about his background, his race, his southern roots, Michael never got angry. He just worked harder, proved himself again and again. "I know what they're thinking," he told me one evening. "I'm not good enough for her. Maybe they're right. But I love her enough to become the man she deserves." The engagement party was perfect. Rebecca glowed in a blue dress that matched her eyes. Michael's speech about second chances and new beginnings had everyone in tears. When he got down on one knee in front of 200 people and promised to love her forever, I believed him completely. Have you ever met someone who changed your family's entire dynamic? Someone who proved all your assumptions wrong? Share your story below, because what happened next shows how dangerous it can be to trust too quickly. The wedding was perfect, Rebecca radiant in white, Michael proud in his tuxedo, and me giving a toast about second chances. If only I had known that some chances come with hidden costs. They didn't just marry for love. They merged their lives into a business dynasty that made headlines from New Jersey to Georgia. Michael moved north permanently, bringing ideas that transformed our company overnight. Where we'd been conservative, he was bold. Where we'd been traditional, he was innovative. Within 6 months, our profits doubled. "We're not just moving products," Michael explained during his first board presentation as family. "We're creating systems that adapt, respond, evolve. The future belongs to companies that think like organisms, not machines." Rebecca sat beside him, taking notes, asking questions that sharpened his points. They finished each other's sentences, anticipated each other's needs. In meetings, they moved like dancers who'd practiced together for years instead of newlyweds still learning each other's rhythms. Their home office overlooked the Hudson, floor-to-ceiling windows framing Manhattan's skyline. Charts and contracts covered every surface, but it was the way they moved around each other, anticipating needs, finishing thoughts, that showed their real connection. Late nights became their specialty. While other couples watched television, Michael and Rebecca built spreadsheets, analyzed markets, planned expansions. I'd find them at 2 a.m, her feet in his lap while she reviewed contracts, him massaging her ankles while explaining supply chain optimization. "This is foreplay for us," Rebecca joked once, but her eyes were serious. "Building something together, creating something bigger than either of us could manage alone, it's better than any romance novel." Their first year brought success that shocked even me. The Atlanta property deal alone netted us $3 million in profit. Michael's Georgia connections opened doors we'd been trying to open for decades. Suddenly, we weren't just a regional company, we were players on the national stage. The pregnancy announcement came during a board meeting. Rebecca stood up, hand on her still flat stomach, and smiled like she held the world's best secret. "We're expecting," she said simply. Michael's grin could have powered the building. He crossed the room in 3 steps, lifted her off her feet, and kissed her like they were alone instead of surrounded by executives and family. "You don't just complete me," Rebecca whispered against his neck later, in the privacy of their office. "You make me better." Their success attracted attention. Business magazines wanted interviews. Industry conferences requested them as keynote speakers. The power couple from different worlds who'd created something extraordinary together. But success has a way of revealing cracks you didn't know existed. The first signs were subtle. Whispers at family gatherings. Questions about Michael's rapid rise to influence. Concerns about how much control he was gaining over company decisions. "He's very confident," my sister mentioned one Sunday dinner. "He's very successful," I replied, but doubt had been planted. The Atlanta property deal seemed routine when Michael suggested it. Prime real estate, perfect for expansion, available at below-market rates through his connections. "Trust me," he said, signing the papers with a flourish. "This is going to set us up for the next decade." That signature would later be called forgery, but at the time, it looked like genius. Michael's business instincts seemed flawless. Every decision he made, every contact he brought in, every strategy he suggested, they all worked. The man had a golden touch that turned everything into profit. Rebecca bloomed under his influence. Pregnancy suited her, but so did partnership. She grew bolder in meetings, more decisive with contracts, more confident in her own judgment. Michael didn't diminish her, he amplified her. Their evenings became legendary among our circle. Dinner parties where business mixed with pleasure, where deals were struck over wine and sealed with handshakes. Rebecca would play hostess while Michael charmed investors, both of them working the room like a team that had been together forever. What's more intimate, building a business together or building a family? Have you ever experienced that kind of partnership? Tell me in the comments, because what came next tested whether their connection could survive suspicion. The Atlanta property deal seemed routine, until Michael suggested putting it in his name for tax purposes. Trust me, he said, signing the papers with a flourish. That signature would later be called forgery. Success has a way of revealing who people really are, and sometimes, what you discover destroys everything you thought you knew. By their second year of marriage, Michael and Rebecca's influence in the company had grown beyond what some family members found comfortable. Michael didn't just suggest strategies anymore, he implemented them. He didn't just attend board meetings, he ran them. When did we start taking orders from him? My nephew asked during a private family gathering. We're not taking orders, I defended. We're following good advice. Are we? Or are we being led somewhere we don't want to go? The family dinner table stretched 12 feet of polished mahogany, but the distance between Michael and the rest of us seemed infinite. Crystal glasses caught the candlelight as conversations died whenever he spoke, resumed when he left the room. Rebecca noticed the shift. I watched her during those dinners, saw how she positioned herself between Michael and the family, trying to bridge gaps that seemed to widen every week. They're jealous, she told me privately. Michael's success makes them feel inadequate. Maybe she was right. Or maybe we were finally seeing what had been hidden behind charm and results. The anonymous letter arrived on a Tuesday. Plain envelope, no return address, delivered to my home office. Inside, a single page with 3 sentences that changed everything. Your son-in-law isn't who he claims to be. Ask him about the Atlanta accounts. Ask him why he needs so much control. I should have thrown it away. Should have trusted the man who'd brought nothing but success to our family. Instead, I hired a private investigator. Just a background check, I told myself. Just to put my mind at ease. The first report came back clean. Michael's Georgia history checked out, his business references were solid, his financial background showed steady growth. I felt foolish for doubting him. Then came the second report. Bank records showed money transfers to accounts I didn't recognize. Meeting schedules that didn't match what Michael had told us. Phone calls to competitors that lasted hours, happened frequently, and were never mentioned in board meetings. The photographs were worse. Michael in restaurants with people he'd never introduced to the family. Michael in parking garages, passing envelopes. Michael in offices that didn't belong to any company we knew. Who was he meeting with? I asked the investigator. I'm still working on that. But whoever they are, these aren't casual business lunches. Rebecca's pregnancy was showing now, her hand constantly resting on her growing belly. She glowed with happiness, talked about nursery colors and baby names. The thought of destroying that joy with suspicion felt like poison. But the evidence kept building. Michael's explanations for his absences became more elaborate. Business trips that required privacy. Meetings with potential investors who demanded confidentiality. Deals so sensitive that even Rebecca couldn't know the details. You trust me, don't you? He'd ask when she questioned his schedule. Of course, she'd answer, but doubt crept into her voice. The family's discomfort grew more obvious. Side conversations stopped when Michael entered rooms. Invitations came with the phrase, just family, more frequently. Board meetings became tense affairs where every suggestion Michael made faced challenges. I think someone's trying to frame him, Rebecca told me one evening. Someone who wants to see him fail. I wanted to believe her. Wanted to believe that the man who made my daughter laugh, who'd brought unprecedented success to our company, who kissed her belly every night and talked to their unborn child, was exactly who he appeared to be. But wanting something doesn't make it true. The breaking point came when Rebecca found papers in Michael's briefcase. Financial documents with signatures that looked like hers but weren't in her handwriting. Account numbers she'd never seen. Investment strategies that bypassed board approval. Maybe there's an explanation, she said, but her hands shook as she showed me the papers. Maybe, I agreed, knowing we'd passed the point where maybe was enough. Have you ever felt like an outsider in your own family? When success becomes a threat instead of a celebration? Share your experience, because what happened next shows how quickly trust can turn to suspicion. When Rebecca found the private investigator's report in my study, her hands shook as she read the first line. Subject's financial history reveals discrepancies in reported assets. The man she shared a bed with might be a stranger. The private investigator's photos showed Michael in places he'd never mentioned, with people he'd never named, and suddenly, 5 years of marriage felt like an elaborate lie. Detective Rodriguez had 20 years of experience investigating corporate fraud. His office smelled of stale coffee and broken promises, walls covered with certificates and commendations that should have been comforting. Instead, they felt like warnings about how much damage one person could inflict. Your son-in-law is careful, Rodriguez said, spreading photographs across his desk like playing cards in a deadly game. Professional meetings in public places, cash transactions, coded conversations. This isn't amateur hour. The first photo showed Michael at a Newark restaurant with a man I didn't recognize. Both were leaning forward, voices obviously low, expressions intense. The timestamp showed 2:30 p.m. on a Tuesday when Michael had told Rebecca he was reviewing contracts at the office. Who is that? I asked. Vincent Caruso. Owns 3 shipping companies that compete directly with yours. Interesting lunch partner for your logistics director. The second photo was worse. Michael in a parking garage, accepting an envelope from a woman in expensive clothes. The third showed him at a bank I'd never heard of, making what looked like a deposit. There's more, Rodriguez said, opening a folder thick with surveillance reports. Bank records show transfers to offshore accounts. Meeting schedules that don't match his official calendar. Phone calls to numbers registered under false names. Each revelation hit like a physical blow. The man who'd become family, who'd held Rebecca during morning sickness, who'd painted the nursery walls with his own hands, that same man might be stealing from us while we slept. How long has this been going on? I asked. Based on the banking patterns, at least 2 years. Possibly longer. 2 years. During Rebecca's pregnancy, during our company's most profitable period, during family dinners where he'd smiled and asked about everyone's day, he'd been lying to all of us. The hardest part wasn't the potential theft. It was imagining Rebecca's face when she learned the truth. What do you need from me? I asked Rodriguez. Access to your company's financial records. Specifically, any accounts or transactions your son-in-law handled personally. That night, I sat in my study with 5 years of financial documents, searching for discrepancies I'd been too trusting to notice before. The numbers told a story I didn't want to believe. Small amounts at first, thousands here and there from accounts Michael had permission to access. Then larger sums as his authority grew. By last year, the transfers had reached 6 figures, always to accounts I couldn't trace. But the worst discovery came in the Atlanta deal paperwork. The property purchase that had seemed like such a brilliant move, Michael's name was on the deed, not the company's. $3 million in profit had gone directly into his personal accounts. He stole it all, I whispered to the empty room. The next morning brought a crisis that revealed how deep the deception ran. Rebecca called, crying so hard I could barely understand her words. Michael's gone, she sobbed. He left for Atlanta yesterday and won't answer his phone. The bank called. There's a problem with the business accounts. Dad, they're saying some of our investments don't exist. I drove to their house immediately, finding Rebecca in her robe at 7 months pregnant, holding a letter that had arrived that morning. Business emergency requires immediate attention, she read. We'll be in touch soon. Take care of yourself and the baby. 27 words. That's all Michael had left for the wife carrying his child and the family he'd sworn to protect. The bank manager confirmed our worst fears. Accounts that should have held millions showed zero balances. Investment certificates were forgeries. Letters of credit were worthless paper. How much? I asked. Preliminary estimate? $8 million. Possibly more. $8 million. Enough to destroy the company, bankrupt the family, and leave Rebecca raising a child alone. But the cruelest part was the timing. Michael had waited until Rebecca was too pregnant to travel, too vulnerable to chase him, too invested in their child to completely hate him. How well do you really know the person you love? What would you do if evidence suggested they weren't who they claimed to be? Tell me in the comments, because what happened next shows how desperation can make even good people do terrible things. The phone call came at midnight, Michael's voice tight with panic. They're trying to destroy me, Rebecca. Everything you're hearing, it's not what it looks like. But the photos on her nightstand suggested otherwise. Nothing reveals the truth like fear, and when Rebecca confronted Michael at midnight, both of them were terrified of what they might discover. Michael had been gone for 3 days when he finally called. Rebecca was in bed, one hand on her swollen belly, the other clutching Rodriguez's surveillance photos. At 7 months pregnant, she looked fragile but her voice carried steel. "Where are you?" she demanded. "Atlanta. Baby, I can explain everything. The photos, the bank accounts, all of it. Someone's trying to frame me. $8 million, Michael. $8 million is missing." Silence stretched across the phone line like a chasm neither could cross. "I know how it looks," he said finally. "But you have to trust me. Everything I did was to protect you, to protect our family. Then come home and prove it." "I can't. Not yet. There are people, dangerous people, who want to use me to hurt you. I won't let that happen." Rebecca laughed, but it sounded like breaking glass. "Hurt me? Michael, I'm dying inside. Our baby is due in 2 months and I don't know if my husband is a criminal or a victim. Give me 1 week. 1 week to gather proof that I'm innocent. Then I'll come home and we'll face this together." "What proof? What people?" "Stop talking in riddles." The line went quiet except for Michael's breathing. When he spoke again, his voice was barely a whisper. "There's something I never told you about the Atlanta deal. About why I really came to work for your father. About why someone would go to such lengths to destroy me. Tell me now. Not over the phone. Not like this. Meet me tomorrow night. Our place in Central Park, where I proposed. Come alone." Rebecca's hand moved protectively over her belly. "I'm 7 months pregnant. I'm not sneaking around like some spy movie." "Then bring your father. But no one else. No police, no investigators, no lawyers. Just family. I'll tell you everything, who's behind this, why they want me destroyed, and what I've really been doing for the past 2 years." After he hung up, Rebecca sat in the darkness for an hour, photos scattered around her like evidence of a life that might be completely false. The baby kicked hard against her ribs, as if protesting the stress its parents were creating. I found her there at 2 a.m., still clutching the phone. "He wants to meet," she said without looking up. "Tomorrow night. He says he can explain everything." "It's a trap," I said immediately. "He's desperate now. Who knows what he might do?" Rebecca's laugh was bitter. "What's he going to do that he hasn't already done? Steal our money? Break our trust? Destroy our family?" She finally looked at me, tears streaming down her face. "I'm pregnant with his child, Dad. I need to know who the father really is." The next evening, Central Park felt like a stage set for the final act of a tragedy. The bench where Michael had proposed 18 months earlier looked different in the harsh December cold, romantic memory transformed into potential crime scene. Michael arrived exactly on time, looking thinner than when he'd left, dressed in jeans and a jacket instead of his usual expensive suits. He moved carefully, constantly checking over his shoulder like a man being hunted. Thank you for coming, he said, but stayed 20 feet away from us. Start talking, I demanded. Michael's story came out in pieces, like a puzzle with half the pieces missing. The Atlanta deal had been legitimate, but it had attracted attention from people who wanted our company destroyed. His meetings with competitors weren't about selling secrets. They were about gathering intelligence on who was targeting us. Vincent Caruso offered me $5 million to sabotage your logistics system, Michael said. When I refused, he threatened Rebecca. That's when I knew they weren't just after the company, they wanted to hurt our family. So you stole $8 million to protect us? Rebecca asked, her voice flat. I didn't steal anything. I moved the money to secure accounts where they couldn't reach it. Accounts in my name because I was the only one they hadn't compromised yet. Compromised? I asked. Michael looked directly at me. Your company has a mole. Someone feeding information to your competitors, someone who's been setting you up for a hostile takeover. Someone who knew that destroying me would leave you vulnerable. The words hit like ice water. A mole in our company meant someone we trusted was betraying us. Someone who knew our strategies, our vulnerabilities, our family dynamics. Who? Rebecca demanded. I'm still gathering proof. But when I have it. No, Rebecca interrupted, standing up despite her bulk. No more secrets, no more gathering proof, no more protecting me from the truth. I'm tired of being treated like I'm made of glass. She walked toward him, each step measured and deliberate. When she was close enough to touch him, she stopped. I'm going to ask you one question, and I want a yes or no answer. Did you steal money from my family? Michael looked into her eyes for a long moment. No. Did you move money without permission? Yes. Why? Because the person I suspected of being the mole had access to those accounts. Moving the money was the only way to protect it until I could prove who was betraying you. Rebecca reached up and touched his face, her fingers tracing the lines of exhaustion around his eyes. Then come home, she said simply. Come home and we'll figure this out together. When was the last time you had to choose between trusting someone you love and protecting yourself? What did that feel like? Share your story below, because what happened next shows that sometimes love requires the ultimate leap of faith. As dawn broke over Central Park, Rebecca made a decision that would change everything. I believe you, she whispered. But my family won't. We need to prove your innocence before Christmas, or you'll lose more than just me. With Christmas 2 weeks away and the family gathering approaching, Michael had 14 days to prove he wasn't the enemy, or lose everything he'd built. The abandoned warehouse in Newark held boxes of financial records dating back decades. Dust covered everything like forgotten secrets, and winter sunlight streamed through broken windows as we searched for proof that would save their marriage. If there's a mole in the company, Michael said, pulling another box from the stack, they've been planning this for years. Small changes to accounts, tiny transfers that wouldn't get noticed individually. Rebecca sat on an overturned crate, sorting through papers despite being 7 months pregnant. Her determination amazed me. Most women in her condition would be home with their feet up, but she was fighting for her family's future. Look at this, she said, holding up a bank statement from 3 years ago. This transfer was supposed to go to our Atlanta expansion fund, but it went somewhere else. Michael took the paper, his eyes scanning the numbers. Vincent Caruso's shell company. They've been bleeding us dry for years, just small enough amounts that we wouldn't notice until it was too late. How much total? I asked, dreading the answer. 12 million, maybe 15. Spread out over 5 years, disguised as legitimate business expenses. The math was devastating. Our company had been slowly murdered while we celebrated our success. Every family dinner where we'd toasted our profits, every board meeting where we'd planned expansions, we'd been dancing on our own grave. But the worst discovery was still coming. Michael, Rebecca called from across the warehouse, her voice strange. You need to see this. She held a folder marked, confidential, family only. Inside were copies of every major decision our company had made for the past 5 years. Board meeting notes that should have been private. Strategy plans that were supposed to be secret. Personal financial information about every family member. Someone's been copying everything, Michael said, his face pale. Every move we made, every plan we had, they knew about it before we did. The betrayal went deeper than money. Someone we trusted had been selling our secrets, planning our destruction, and setting Michael up to take the blame. But who? It has to be someone with high-level access, I said. Someone who attends board meetings, handles sensitive documents. Someone the family trusts completely, Rebecca added. We spent the next 6 hours going through evidence, building a case that painted Michael as the victim instead of the villain. Bank records showed the money had been moved to protect it, not steal it. Meeting schedules proved he'd been investigating the fraud, not causing it. But evidence wasn't enough. We needed to identify the real criminal. I think I know who it is, Michael said finally, holding up a document that made my blood run cold. But you're not going to want to believe it. The signature on the authorization form was unmistakable. Someone who'd been family longer than Michael, someone we'd never suspect, someone who had access to everything and the trust of everyone. No, Rebecca whispered, staring at the paper. Not them. Anyone but them. The betrayal wasn't just about money, it was about family destroying family, trust twisted into weapon. The person who'd been playing innocent while destroying us from inside was someone we'd never see coming. As we locked up the warehouse, Michael pulled Rebecca close despite her pregnant belly between them. Their kiss tasted like desperation and hope mixed together. We have proof now, he said against her lips. But presenting it is going to tear the family apart. The family's already torn apart, she replied. Now we're just deciding who bleeds. That night, Rebecca went into early labor. The stress, the shock, the physical strain of fighting for her marriage, it all caught up at once. As we rushed to the hospital, Michael holding her hand in the ambulance, I wondered if saving their relationship was going to cost them their child. Have you ever discovered that your greatest enemy was someone you'd never suspect? Someone who smiled at your table while planning your destruction? Share your experience below, because what happened next shows that sometimes the people closest to you are the most dangerous. The accountant's suicide note changed everything, but it arrived too late. The family had already made their decision about Michael, and Christmas Eve was tomorrow. I arrived at my daughter's mansion expecting holiday joy. Instead, I found my son-in-law locked outside in the Ohio snow while his own family celebrated without him. The drive from New Jersey to Rebecca's Ohio home usually filled me with anticipation. Christmas at the big house meant family, laughter, presents under a 12-foot tree, and grandchildren running around in their pajamas. This year felt different. Heavy. Like driving toward a funeral instead of a celebration. Snow fell in thick curtains as I pulled into the circular driveway. The mansion looked perfect, every window glowing warm yellow, Christmas lights twinkling on the bare tree branches, wreaths hanging on every door. Picture-perfect holiday scene, except for the figure hunched on the front porch. Michael sat on the porch swing, wearing just a thin jacket and jeans. No hat, no gloves, his breath coming out in white puffs as he shivered in the December cold. At first, I thought he was getting some air, maybe taking a phone call. Then I noticed the locked door behind him. Michael? I called, climbing the porch steps. What are you doing out here? He looked up, and I saw exhaustion in his eyes. Not just tired, defeated. Like a man who'd been fighting a war and finally accepted he was going to lose. They don't want me inside, he said simply. What do you mean? It's Christmas Eve. You live here. Michael's laugh was bitter. Not anymore, apparently. Through the frosted windows, I could see the family gathered around the fireplace. Rebecca's mother serving hot chocolate, the kids playing with new toys, everyone looking relaxed and happy. Everyone except the man sitting in the cold. Where's Rebecca? Inside. She tried to let me in earlier, but... Michael shook his head. Her mother said I wasn't welcome until everything got sorted out. Rebecca's 8 months pregnant and stressed enough without fighting about me. I tried the door handle. Locked from the inside. This is ridiculous, I said, pounding on the door. Open up. The curtain moved slightly, and I caught a glimpse of my sister's face before it fell back into place. A few minutes later, Rebecca's mother cracked the door open just enough to speak through. He can't come in, she said firmly. Not after what he did. What he did? You mean try to save our company from being destroyed? We know about the missing money, about the lies, about everything. The family's made a decision. The family doesn't get to lock out my daughter's husband on Christmas Eve. The family gets to protect itself from thieves. The door slammed shut. Michael hadn't moved from the swing during this exchange. He sat there like a man who'd expected nothing different, who'd prepared himself for rejection. How long have you been out here? I asked. Since noon. Rebecca tried to sneak me in through the kitchen, but her cousins were there making cookies. They threatened to leave if she didn't choose, them or me. And she chose them. She's pregnant and exhausted. I told her to stay inside where it's warm. The baby's more important than my comfort. Even locked outside by people he'd considered family, Michael was putting Rebecca and their unborn child first. The man they were treating like a criminal was still thinking like a husband and father. I pulled out my phone and called Rebecca. Dad? Her voice was thick with tears. Please don't make this harder than it already is. Open the door, Rebecca. I can't. Everyone's here, Mom, Aunt Sarah, the cousins, even Grandma flew in from Florida. They all think Michael stole from us. If I choose him over them, I'll lose my whole family. You'll lose your husband. I know, she whispered. I know, and it's killing me. But I can't handle everyone fighting, not this close to my due date. The doctor said stress could hurt the baby. Through the window, I could see her standing in the hallway, one hand on her huge belly, tears streaming down her face. She looked torn in half, wanting to be loyal to Michael but terrified of the consequences. What if he's innocent? I asked. What if he's not? The line went dead. Michael and I sat on that porch for 2 hours, watching his family celebrate Christmas without him. The kids opened presents, the adults passed around wine, everyone smiled and laughed like their world was perfect. Meanwhile, the man who'd helped build their wealth froze outside their door. You could leave, I told him. Go to a hotel, somewhere warm. Come back when this gets resolved. Where am I going to go? This is my family. That's my wife, my unborn child. Running away won't prove I'm innocent. It'll just prove I'm a coward. At 9 o'clock, Rebecca appeared at the window. She pressed her palm against the glass, and Michael pressed his against the other side. For a moment, they were connected through ice and pain and love that couldn't bridge the gap between them. Then she was gone, and we were alone again in the cold. Have you ever witnessed an injustice but felt powerless to stop it? When family loyalty conflicts with what's right? Share your experience, because what happened next changed everything I thought I knew about justice. When I opened that door and invited Michael inside, the silence that fell over the room was deafening. Rebecca's eyes met mine across the crowded living room, and I saw something there that chilled me more than the winter wind: fear. Christmas morning brought more than presents, it brought the evidence that would either destroy our family or save it. I couldn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Michael on that porch, shivering while his family celebrated inside. By 5 a.m., I was in my car, driving back to the mansion with a folder full of documents that would change everything. The house was quiet when I arrived, everyone sleeping off Christmas Eve wine and staying warm in their beds. Everyone except Michael, who I found in the kitchen making coffee, still wearing yesterday's clothes. Couldn't sleep either, he asked. Hard to sleep when an innocent man is being treated like a criminal. Michael's smile was sad. You don't know I'm innocent. You want to believe it, but wanting something doesn't make it true. I know you're innocent because I know who's guilty. I spread the accountant's suicide note across the kitchen table, along with bank records, forged documents, and 5 years of evidence that proved Michael had been set up. Richard Chin killed himself 2 days ago, I said. Left this confession behind. He's the one who's been stealing from us, forging signatures, setting you up to take the blame. Michael read the letter twice, his hands shaking by the end. He was Rebecca's godfather. I called him Uncle Richard. He taught me how to read financial statements. He also stole $15 million over 5 years and made it look like you did it. The kitchen door swung open, and Rebecca walked in wearing her robe, belly huge with their child. She moved slowly, like every step hurt, but her eyes were alert. I heard voices, she said. What's going on? I handed her the suicide note. She read it in complete silence, one hand supporting her back, the other pressed to her mouth. When she finished, tears were streaming down her face. Uncle Richard, she whispered. He bounced me on his knee when I was little. He taught me to play chess. He also destroyed our family to cover his gambling debts, I said. The rest of the family woke up one by one, drawn by voices and the smell of coffee. Soon the kitchen was crowded with people in pajamas and robes, all staring at evidence that rewrote everything they thought they knew. Rebecca's mother picked up the bank records, her face going pale. These signatures. I watched Richard handle our accounts for 20 years. I never questioned anything. None of us did, I said. That's what made him perfect for the job. My sister held up a forged document. This looks exactly like Rebecca's signature. How did we not notice? Because we trusted him, Rebecca said, her voice hollow. Because he was family. The silence stretched until Michael finally spoke. I don't want apologies, he said quietly. I just want my wife and child back. Rebecca crossed to him slowly, her huge belly making movement difficult. When she reached him, she put both hands on his face. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm so sorry I doubted you. You were protecting our baby. I understand. No, you don't understand. Rebecca's voice cracked. I chose them over you. When you needed me most, I chose them. Michael kissed her forehead. You chose safety. For you and our child. That's what mothers do. I chose wrong. You chose love. Sometimes love makes terrible decisions to protect what matters most. Rebecca's mother stepped forward, looking older than I'd ever seen her. Michael, she said formally. I owe you an apology that can't be given in words. We locked you out of your own home, treated you like a criminal, made you suffer for crimes you didn't commit. You were protecting your family, Michael replied. I can't fault anyone for that. We weren't protecting our family. We were destroying it. The Christmas tree lights twinkled in the living room, but nobody was thinking about presents. We were all thinking about trust, about judgment, about how easily love can turn to suspicion when fear gets involved. Rebecca suddenly gasped, her hand flying to her belly. The baby, she said. Something's wrong. Michael was beside her instantly, supporting her weight as she doubled over in pain. Contractions, she panted. But it's too early. Stress, I said. All this emotional trauma triggered early labor. As we rushed Rebecca to the hospital, I realized that clearing Michael's name was only the first step. Healing the damage we'd done to their marriage, to their trust, to their family, that was going to take much longer. How do you rebuild trust after it's been broken? What does forgiveness look like in your family? Tell me in the comments, because what happened next shows that sometimes clearing your name isn't enough to heal your heart. But as we celebrated Michael's innocence, none of us noticed the car parked across the street, or the figure inside taking photographs. The real threat to our family was just beginning. We thought clearing Michael's name would end our troubles. We never imagined it would paint a target on our backs. The hospital room smelled like disinfectant and fear. Rebecca lay connected to monitors that tracked her contractions and the baby's heartbeat, while Michael held her hand and whispered promises about their future together. False labor, the doctor announced after 2 hours of tests. Stress-induced, but mother and baby are stable. However, she needs complete bed rest until delivery. At least something good came from this nightmare, Rebecca said weakly. That's when my phone rang. Mr. Davidson? The voice was professional, cold. This is Janet Morrison from Channel 7 News. We'd like to comment on your son-in-law's arrest warrant. What arrest warrant? The one issued this morning for embezzlement, fraud, and money laundering. Our sources say Michael Chen is facing federal charges. I hung up and immediately called our lawyer. The news was worse than I'd feared. Someone leaked the original investigation to the FBI, our attorney explained. They issued warrants based on the old evidence, before Richard's confession came to light. Michael needs to turn himself in immediately. But we have proof he's innocent. Proof takes time to process through the system. Until then, he's wanted by federal agents. Michael took the news better than I expected. He kissed Rebecca's forehead and stood up calmly. I'll turn myself in, he said. Fight this properly, through lawyers and courts. No, Rebecca struggled to sit up despite the doctor's orders. We just got you back. I'm not losing you again. You're not losing me. I'm clearing my name officially this time. But as we prepared to leave the hospital, I noticed the black sedan that had been parked outside for the past hour. The same car that had followed us from the house. We're being watched, I told Michael quietly. By who? That's what worries me. The answer came when we returned to the house. Vincent Caruso was sitting in our living room like he owned the place, drinking coffee from our best china while Rebecca's mother hovered nervously nearby. Mr. Davidson, he said, standing with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. We need to talk. About what? About the unfortunate situation with your son-in-law. About the federal charges he's facing. About how I might be able to help make them disappear. Michael stepped forward, positioning himself between Caruso and me. What do you want? Smart question. I want your logistics company. Your routes, your contracts, your customer list. Sign everything over to me, and I'll make sure the FBI loses interest in prosecuting you. You set him up, Rebecca said from her wheelchair. You and Richard, you planned this whole thing. Caruso shrugged. Richard was weak, got greedy, started skimming too much. When he realized he was about to get caught, he decided to blame everything on your husband. Unfortunately for him, guilt drove him to suicide before he could enjoy his retirement. You killed him, Michael said. Richard killed himself. I just provided the motivation. The pieces clicked together in my mind. Richard hadn't been working alone, he'd been working for Caruso, systematically destroying our company from the inside. When the scheme started falling apart, Caruso had decided to let Richard take the blame and frame Michael as an accomplice. So what's it going to be? Caruso asked. Sign over the company, or watch your son-in-law go to federal prison for crimes he didn't commit. We have evidence that clears him, I said. Evidence that a dead man wrote under duress? Please. My lawyers will tear that confession apart in court. Meanwhile, Michael spends the next 10 years behind bars while his wife raises their child alone. Rebecca made a sound like a wounded animal. The stress of the day, the threat to her husband, the possibility of losing everything again. It was too much for someone in her condition. Think about it, Caruso said, heading for the door. You have 48 hours to decide. After that, the FBI comes calling, and my offer expires. After he left, we sat in stunned silence. Just when we'd proved Michael's innocence, a new enemy had emerged with the power to destroy him anyway. We fight, Michael said finally. Whatever it takes, however long it takes, we fight. With what? Rebecca asked. He has federal agents, lawyers, probably judges in his pocket. We have a suicide note from a dead embezzler. We have the truth. Since when does truth matter more than power? That night, I found Michael on the same porch where he'd been locked out less than 24 hours ago. But this time, he wasn't shivering in the cold, he was planning a war. I won't let him destroy our family, Michael said. Not after everything we've been through. What are you thinking? I'm thinking Vincent Caruso made one mistake. He assumed we'd roll over and die quietly. The look in Michael's eyes reminded me why he'd been so successful in business, why he'd won over our family, why Rebecca had fallen in love with him. Beneath the gentle husband and father was a fighter who'd been pushed too far. Have you ever discovered that your personal problems were being used against you professionally? How did you fight back? Share your story, because what happened next shows that sometimes the only way to defeat a bully is to become more dangerous than they are. The ultimatum arrived by messenger at dawn: sell the company at a loss, or watch intimate family secrets become front-page news. We had 48 hours to decide. They tried to break us by attacking our weaknesses. They never expected us to turn those weaknesses into weapons. The war room we created in the mansion's library looked like something from a political campaign. Laptops open on every surface, phones ringing constantly, strategy maps covering the walls as we planned our counteroffensive. Michael had transformed overnight. The gentle son-in-law who'd painted nursery walls was gone, replaced by a strategic mind that saw 3 moves ahead of every opponent. He'd spent years building business relationships, and now he was calling in every favor. Caruso thinks he's untouchable, Michael said, pointing to a chart on the wall. But everyone has enemies. Everyone has secrets. Everyone has something to lose. Our first ally came from an unexpected source. Maria Santos, the FBI agent investigating the embezzlement charges, called asking to meet privately. I've been watching this case develop, she said over coffee at a diner outside town. Something stinks about the timing, about how quickly charges were filed, about who's pushing for prosecution. Caruso has connections in the bureau? I asked. Caruso has connections everywhere. But he also has enemies everywhere. Give me something I can use, and I'll make sure this investigation goes in the right direction. Michael slid a folder across the table. Bank records showing payments from Caruso's companies to Richard Chen. Meeting schedules. Phone records. Everything you need to prove Richard was working for him. Agent Santos flipped through the documents, her expression growing darker with each page. This is enough to open a RICO investigation, she said. Caruso's been using your accountant to destroy companies all over the region, not just yours. How long to build a case? Months. Maybe years. Meanwhile, your son-in-law is still wanted for federal crimes. What if we gave you something bigger? Michael asked. Like what? Michael pulled out his phone and played a recording that made Agent Santos sit forward in her chair. You recorded your conversation with Caruso? She asked. Rebecca's baby monitor has excellent range, Michael said with the first smile I'd seen from him in days. Amazing what people will confess when they think they're safe. The recording was gold, Caruso admitting to the frame-up, describing his scheme to destroy companies from the inside, even making threats about what would happen if we didn't cooperate. This changes everything, Agent Santos said. Give me 24 hours. While we waited for the FBI to act, Michael worked on our public relations campaign. If Caruso wanted to fight dirty, we'd fight smarter. The story isn't about embezzlement anymore, Michael explained to the Channel 7 reporter who'd called earlier. It's about a family business fighting off organized crime, about corruption reaching into law enforcement, about how the American dream gets crushed by criminals with connections. The interview aired that evening, painting us as victims instead of criminals. Within hours, our phones were ringing with calls from other business owners who'd been targeted by similar schemes. Caruso destroyed my shipping company 3 years ago, one caller said. Same playbook, turned my accountant against me, framed me for theft, forced me to sell everything to avoid prison. He did it to us too, said another. But we were too scared to fight back. Rebecca watched the news coverage from her bed, doctor's orders keeping her horizontal but her mind fully engaged in the battle for their future. Look at that, she said, pointing to the television. Protesters outside Caruso's office. People carrying signs that say "Justice for the Davidson family." It's working, Michael said, sitting beside her on the bed. Public pressure, FBI investigation, media attention. He's losing control of the narrative. What if it's not enough? Michael took her hand, careful not to disturb the four-line that kept her hydrated. Then we'll think of something else. I'm not giving up our family's legacy to some two-bit criminal. The call came at midnight. Agent Santos, her voice tight with exhaustion and excitement. We got him, she said. Caruso and 6 associates, arrested on federal racketeering charges. The investigation into your husband is officially closed. Rebecca cried with relief, but Michael looked thoughtful. What's wrong? I asked. Men like Caruso don't go down alone. He'll try to take us with him, claim we were accomplices, anything to reduce his sentence. We have evidence. Evidence can be twisted. Stories can be changed. This isn't over yet. As if summoned by his words, the phone rang again. This time it was our lawyer, his voice grim. Michael needs to see this, he said. Caruso's legal team just filed a motion claiming he was working with your accountant to expose corruption in your company, not cause it. They're saying Michael was the real mastermind and Caruso was trying to stop him. When have you had to turn your greatest vulnerability into your greatest strength? What did that teach you about yourself? Tell me below, because what happened next shows that winning one battle doesn't mean you've won the war. The press conference was scheduled for noon, but at 11:30 a.m., Rebecca collapsed. As paramedics rushed her to the hospital, Michael faced an impossible choice: save his wife or save their company. Sometimes the most important battles aren't fought in boardrooms, they're fought in hospital corridors where love matters more than money. The ambulance lights flashed red and blue against the December snow as Rebecca collapsed in our driveway. One moment she was walking toward the house, the next she was on the ground, clutching her belly and screaming. Something's wrong with the baby, she gasped as the paramedics loaded her into the ambulance. Michael arrived at the hospital 20 minutes after us, still wearing clothes from 3 days on the road. His hair was a mess, his eyes wild with panic, but the moment he saw Rebecca on that hospital bed, everything else disappeared. I'm here, he whispered, taking her hand. I'm not going anywhere. The doctor's news hit us like a sledgehammer. Rebecca's blood pressure had spiked dangerously high. The baby was in distress. They needed to deliver immediately, 8 weeks early, or risk losing both mother and child. We need your husband's medical consent, the nurse said, holding out papers. He's not legally, I started to say, then stopped. Legal problems could wait. This was about saving lives. Michael signed without hesitation, his hands shaking so badly he could barely hold the pen. The operating room doors swung shut, leaving us alone in the waiting area. Michael slumped into a plastic chair, head in his hands, and for the first time since I'd met him, he looked completely broken. This is my fault, he said. The stress, the running, the secrets, I did this to her. You both did what you thought was right, I replied, surprising myself by meaning it. The hours crawled by like years. Michael paced the hallway, called Rodriguez for updates on the investigation, stared at his phone like it might deliver miracles. I watched this man I'd suspected of being a criminal fall apart over my daughter's bedside. At 3 a.m, a nurse finally emerged. The baby's in NICU, but breathing on her own. Your wife is stable but needs rest. Her? Michael asked, his voice cracking. Congratulations, you have a daughter. I followed Michael to the nursery window where a tiny girl lay surrounded by tubes and machines. She weighed 3 pounds, 4 ounces, small enough to fit in Michael's hands, if the doctors would let him hold her. She's perfect, he whispered, pressing his palm against the glass. She's absolutely perfect. Rebecca was awake when we entered her room, pale but alert. Michael rushed to her side, kissing her forehead, her cheeks, her hands. Is she okay? Rebecca asked. She's beautiful. She's strong. She's ours, Michael said, and the way he said ours made something shift in my chest. That's when Rebecca told us news that changed everything again. The doctor found something during the surgery, she said quietly. Something that explains why I've been so tired, so emotional, so sick. Michael's face went white. What kind of something? I'm not just having one baby, Michael. There's another one. Twins. The second baby was hidden behind the first one on all the ultrasounds. The silence in that hospital room was deafening. Michael stared at Rebecca like she'd just told him the world was flat. Twins, he finally managed. Twins. And the second one is still inside me, not ready to be born yet. The medical explanation was complicated, but it boiled down to this: Rebecca was carrying twins with different development timelines. One baby was ready to survive outside the womb, the other needed several more weeks. How is that possible? I asked the doctor. Rare, but not unheard of. We'll monitor the second baby closely. If Rebecca stays on strict bed rest, we might be able to wait another month. Michael sat down hard in the visitor's chair, running his hands through his hair. 2 babies, he said. 2 children depending on us to get this right. The stakes had just doubled. We weren't just fighting for Rebecca's future or Michael's reputation anymore. We were fighting for 2 innocent lives who would either inherit a legacy or a disaster. That night, Michael slept in the hospital chair beside Rebecca's bed. I found him there at dawn, holding her hand while she slept, whispering promises to her belly about the child still growing inside. I know what you're thinking, he said without looking up. That I should disappear. That I'm too dangerous to be around them. What I'm thinking, I said carefully, is that a guilty man wouldn't have stayed. Michael finally met my eyes. I never took a penny that wasn't meant to protect this family. When this is over, when you see the proof, you'll understand why I had to lie. The morning brought visitors we didn't expect. Rodriguez appeared with a thick folder and a grim expression. I found your mole, he said simply. The name on the report made my blood run cold. Someone I'd trusted for 15 years. Someone who knew every detail of our business, our family, our vulnerabilities. How long? I asked. At least 5 years. Possibly longer. They've been feeding information to your competitors while embezzling funds to cover their tracks. Michael looked vindicated but exhausted. I knew if I accused them without proof, you'd never believe me. So I gathered evidence while moving money to protect it. Why didn't you just tell us? Rebecca asked from her hospital bed. Because they threatened you specifically. They knew about the pregnancy, about your schedule, about places you went alone. I couldn't risk your safety while building a case. The betrayal cut deeper than the theft. This person had eaten at our dinner table, celebrated holidays with us, held our children when they were born. They'd smiled at Rebecca's wedding, congratulated Michael on his success, and stolen from us the entire time. Have you ever discovered that someone you trusted was living a double life? When the people closest to you turn out to be strangers? Share your experience, because what we learned next showed that some betrayals run deeper than money. The ultrasound machine hummed quietly as the doctor showed us the second baby, still growing safely inside Rebecca. She's a fighter, just like her sister, the doctor said. Michael's eyes filled with tears as he watched his daughters on the screen, one fighting for life in the NICU, the other fighting to grow strong enough to join her. The news of Rebecca's twins didn't just change their family, it changed how everyone saw the battle they were fighting. Rebecca's hospital room became our war headquarters. Charts covered the walls, legal documents spread across every surface, while the steady beep of monitors reminded us what we were really fighting for. The NICU allowed Michael to hold his daughter for the first time on day 3. I watched through the window as this man who'd commanded boardrooms and negotiated million-dollar deals trembled while holding 3 pounds of pure possibility. Her name is Hope, he whispered to Rebecca later. Hope Michaela. Because she gave me hope when I thought I'd lost everything. The second baby, still growing inside Rebecca, had been nicknamed Faith by the nurses. Faith that everything will work out, Rebecca explained, one hand constantly resting on her belly. Hope and Faith. Even their names felt like a promise that this story would have a happy ending. The legal battles moved faster once we had proof of the real thief. Our family lawyer, Thomas Chen, laid out the evidence like building blocks, each piece of proof supporting the next until the case was unshakable. The embezzlement started small, Chen explained. A few thousand here and there from accounts they thought no one would notice. When Michael joined the company and started asking questions, they escalated to frame him. The forged signatures weren't Michael's crime, they were someone else's way of making him look guilty. The mysterious meetings weren't about selling secrets, they were about gathering evidence of the real conspiracy. But the most shocking revelation came when Rodriguez connected our case to a wider investigation. Your company wasn't the only target, he explained. This person was part of a network that systematically infiltrated family businesses, gained trust over years, then stole everything when the time was right. 5 other families in 3 states had been victims of the same scheme. Millions of dollars stolen, reputations destroyed, relationships ruined, all by people who'd been trusted completely. They chose Michael as the fall guy because he was the outsider, Rodriguez continued. The new husband, the different background, the easy target for suspicion. Rebecca listened to all of this from her hospital bed, getting stronger every day while her belly grew rounder. The doctors were amazed by her recovery, blood pressure stable, second baby developing perfectly, spirits high despite everything. I feel guilty for being happy, she told Michael one evening. Our lives are falling apart, but I keep thinking about our daughters, about raising them together, about the family we're building. Don't feel guilty for joy, Michael replied, kissing her forehead. Joy is what we're fighting for. The media attention started small, local business papers reporting on corporate fraud investigations. Then national outlets picked up the story of the pregnant woman whose husband had been framed while she fought for her life in the hospital. Family business, family betrayal, read the headline in Forbes. Love and loyalty in the corporate world, announced Business Week. Suddenly, everyone wanted to interview the couple who'd survived attempted destruction of their marriage, their business, and their family. Michael and Rebecca became symbols of something larger, proof that love could survive even the most calculated attacks. But the real victory came in the hospital chapel at 2 a.m. on a Tuesday. I found Michael there, not praying but just sitting quietly in the dark. He looked up when I entered but didn't speak. What are you thinking about? I asked. Rebecca. The babies. How close we came to losing everything. He paused, then looked directly at me. I know I'll never completely earn back your trust. I know that keeping secrets, even for good reasons, damaged something between us. Trust is like pregnancy, I said, surprising myself with the comparison. It takes time to grow, it's fragile when it's new, but when it's ready to be born, it's stronger than anything that tried to destroy it. Michael's smile was the first genuine one I'd seen from him in months. The legal settlement started coming in within weeks. Not just the return of stolen money, but damages for the emotional trauma, the attempted destruction of reputation, the medical costs from Rebecca's complicated pregnancy. But the biggest victory was personal, not financial. I want to expand the business, Rebecca announced from her hospital bed, one hand on her belly, the other holding Michael's. I want to create something our daughters can inherit, not just money, but a legacy they can be proud of. Michael's eyes lit up with the same fire I'd seen during his first presentation years earlier. What did you have in mind? A foundation. Something that helps other families who've been targeted like we were. Legal aid, financial counseling, emotional support, everything we needed but had to find on our own. The Connor Michael Family Foundation was born that day in a hospital room, named for both sides of the family that had survived an attack meant to tear them apart. How does protecting your children change how you fight your battles? What would you sacrifice to secure their future? Tell me in the comments, because what happened next proved that sometimes the greatest victories come from the deepest pain. The ultrasound tech smiled as she pointed to the monitor. Baby Faith is now big enough to survive outside the womb. We can schedule delivery whenever you're ready. Rebecca's eyes filled with tears as she looked at Michael. Our family is complete, she whispered. The courtroom battle wasn't just about money, it was about whether love and loyalty could triumph over greed and betrayal. Judge Martinez had seen corporate fraud cases for 20 years, but she'd never seen one where the victims fought back from a hospital room while expecting twins. The courtroom was packed, family, friends, reporters, and business leaders who'd been following our story. Michael sat beside Rebecca's wheelchair, both of them holding Hope while Faith kicked actively inside Rebecca's belly. Our lawyers had arranged for testimony via video link from the hospital, but Rebecca insisted on being there in person. "Our daughters need to see this," she said. "They need to know their parents stood up for what was right." The evidence was overwhelming. Bank records, forged documents, recorded conversations, testimony from other victims, everything building to a case so clear that even the defense looked defeated. When our former accountant took the stand, the courtroom fell silent. Sarah Martinez had worked for our family for 15 years, handled our personal finances, attended birthday parties, babysat Rebecca when she was young. "Why?" was all I could ask when she confessed. "It started small," she said, "not meeting my eyes. Just borrowing money I planned to pay back. Then it got easier. Then I met people who taught me how to steal bigger amounts, how to frame someone else, how to disappear when it was time." "You destroyed families," the prosecutor said. "I know." Sarah's voice was barely a whisper. "I know what I did was wrong. But when they told me to frame Michael, I thought it would be easy. He was the outsider. No one would question it. But they did question it," the prosecutor continued. "His wife questioned it. Her father questioned it. And Michael fought back." The judge's verdict took 30 minutes to deliver, but the key points were clear: full restitution of stolen funds, criminal charges for fraud and conspiracy, and damages for emotional distress that brought our total settlement to $12 million. But the most important moment came when Judge Martinez addressed Michael directly. "Mr. Michael Connor," she said, using the hyphenated name he'd adopted when he married Rebecca, "this court finds you completely innocent of all charges and commends you for your efforts to protect your family while gathering evidence of the real crimes." The courtroom erupted in applause. Michael buried his face in Rebecca's neck while she held Hope and whispered, "It's over. It's finally over." The reporters outside the courthouse wanted quotes, statements, exclusive interviews. Michael stepped up to the microphones with Rebecca beside him, Hope sleeping peacefully in his arms. "This isn't just about our family," he said, his voice carrying clearly across the courthouse steps. "It's about what happens when people try to use prejudice and suspicion to destroy something good. They thought I'd be an easy target because I was different, because I was the outsider who married into the family. What's your message for other families facing similar situations?" a reporter called out. Rebecca leaned into the microphone. "Trust the people who show you love through actions, not just words. And never stop fighting for your family, no matter how impossible the odds seem." The media coverage that followed was everything we could have hoped for. Our story became a symbol of resilience, family loyalty, and the power of truth to overcome deception. But the real celebration happened in the hospital room 2 hours later. "I'm ready," Rebecca announced to the doctors. "I want to have Faith today. I want our family to be complete." The delivery was smooth, nothing like Hope's emergency arrival weeks earlier. Faith came into the world pink and screaming, weighing a healthy 6 pounds, 3 ounces. Michael held both his daughters for the first time together, tears streaming down his face as he looked at Rebecca with wonder. "Two perfect girls," he whispered. "Two perfect daughters who will never doubt where they belong or who loves them." The family photo taken that day became the centerpiece of every article about our story. Rebecca in her hospital bed, Michael beside her holding Hope, with newborn Faith sleeping peacefully in Rebecca's arms. All of us smiling like people who'd walked through fire and come out stronger. The Connor Michael Family Foundation officially launched 6 months later with an initial funding of $5 million. Our mission was simple: provide legal, financial, and emotional support to families targeted by corporate fraud and identity theft. Michael's speech at the launch event brought the audience to tears. "They tried to destroy us by turning us against each other," he said. "But families aren't just about blood or last names. They're about who stands with you when everything falls apart, who believes in you when the evidence looks bad, who fights for you when you can't fight for yourself." He looked directly at me during that last part, and I understood that we weren't just business partners anymore. We weren't just connected by marriage. We were family in the truest sense of the word. Have you ever experienced a moment when justice truly prevailed? When persistence paid off against impossible odds? Share your victory story below, because what Michael revealed next showed that some secrets are worth keeping until the perfect moment. As we left the courthouse, Michael stopped on the steps and looked back. "There's something I never told you," he said to Rebecca, his voice carrying a weight that made everyone freeze. "About why I really came to work for your father 5 years ago. The final secret wasn't about money or business, it was about a love story that began long before anyone realized." Standing on the courthouse steps with snow beginning to fall again, Michael's confession painted their entire love story in new colors. Not chance encounter, but destiny fulfilled. "I need to tell you something that's been eating at me for 5 years, Michael said, his voice steady but his hands shaking as he held faith. "About the day we met, about why I was really at that conference, about why I came to work for your father." Rebecca adjusted hope in her arms, both babies sleeping peacefully despite the December cold. "What are you talking about?" Michael looked at me, then at the reporters still lingering nearby, then back at Rebecca. "Can we go somewhere private? This isn't a conversation for strangers." We ended up in the hospital's family lounge, empty except for us and the soft hum of vending machines. Michael placed Faith in her carrier, then knelt beside Rebecca's wheelchair. 5 years ago, I was working for a consulting firm in Atlanta. My boss sent me to research logistics companies in the Northeast, companies that might be vulnerable to acquisition. "Acquisition?" I asked, not liking where this was heading. "Your company was on the list. Connor Industries, family-owned, successful, but potentially vulnerable due to traditional management styles. I was supposed to attend your conference, assess your weaknesses, report back." Rebecca's face had gone pale. "You were spying on us?" "I was supposed to be. But then I saw your picture." Michael pulled out his phone, scrolled through old photos, and showed us an image I'd forgotten existed. Rebecca's headshot from the conference brochure, taken 6 months after her divorce when she was just starting to smile again. "This picture," Michael said, his voice dropping to almost a whisper. "I stared at this picture for 2 weeks before the conference. There was something about your eyes, about the way you looked like you were challenging the world to prove you wrong." "You fell in love with a photograph?" Rebecca asked, but her voice held wonder instead of skepticism. "I fell in love with what I saw in that photograph. Strength. Intelligence. Someone who'd been hurt but wasn't broken. Someone who was ready to trust again if the right person proved they were worthy." Michael stood up, began pacing the small room like he had too much energy to contain. "So I went to the conference planning to meet you. Not to spy on your company, but to see if the woman in the photograph was as incredible as I imagined." "And?" Rebecca prompted. "And you were better. You were everything I'd hoped and things I'd never dared to dream. When you challenged my presentation, when you caught that error I'd planted to see if you were really listening, I knew right then that I was never going back to Atlanta. Not alone." The silence in that room was profound. 2 babies sleeping peacefully while their parents processed a revelation that reframed everything they thought they knew about their beginning. "I called my boss that night and quit," Michael continued. "Told him I'd found something more valuable than any acquisition. Then I spent 3 days working up the courage to ask your father for a job." I remembered that conversation. Michael calling out of the blue, asking for a meeting, claiming he had ideas that could revolutionize our logistics operations. "You never mentioned the consulting firm," I said. "Because I was terrified you'd think I was still working for them. So I buried that part of my history, created a narrative that was true but incomplete." Rebecca was crying now, quiet tears that spoke of understanding rather than betrayal. "You gave up your career for me," she said. "Before you even knew if I'd be interested." "I gave up a job for a chance," Michael corrected. "The career I built with you was better than anything I'd ever imagined possible." Michael knelt beside her wheelchair again, taking her hands in his. "When the investigation started, when people questioned my motives for marrying you, I wanted to tell them about this. About how I'd loved you before I met you, how I'd chosen you before you chose me. But I was afraid it would sound crazy, obsessive, like some kind of stalker fantasy. It sounds romantic, Rebecca said, laughing through her tears. It sounds like the most romantic thing anyone's ever done for me. The revelation recontextualized everything. Michael's immediate integration into our family, his passionate defense of our business interests, his willingness to risk everything to protect us from fraud. He hadn't been an outsider trying to fit in. He'd been a man who'd found his home and would do anything to protect it. The consulting firm came after me, Michael admitted. When I refused to deliver intelligence about your company, when I married Rebecca instead of completing my assignment, they were furious. They're the ones who connected me with the people trying to buy out your business. So the threats were real? I asked. More real than I let you know. They wanted revenge for what they saw as betrayal. Destroying my marriage and bankrupting your company was supposed to be punishment for choosing love over money. Rebecca reached up and touched his face, her fingers tracing the lines of exhaustion and stress that had marked the past 2 years. No more secrets, she said firmly. From now on, we face everything together. No protecting me from the truth, no hiding things to keep me safe, no carrying burdens alone. No more secrets, Michael agreed. As we prepared to leave the hospital with both babies, I realized that this wasn't an ending, it was a beginning. Not just for Michael and Rebecca, but for our entire family's understanding of what loyalty really means. Do you believe in love at first sight? Have you ever discovered that someone's feelings ran deeper than you knew? Share your story of hidden devotion, because what happened next proved that the strongest foundations are built on complete honesty. As they prepared to leave the hospital with both daughters, Rebecca felt faith move against her chest and realized with perfect clarity that their family story was just beginning. Our girls will grow up knowing they were wanted before they were even conceived, she whispered to Michael. 1 year later, the Christmas tree stood in the same Ohio mansion, but everything else had changed, including the 2 baby girls sleeping peacefully in Michael's arms. The family gathering looked similar to that terrible Christmas Eve when I'd found Michael locked outside in the snow. Same house, same decorations, same extended family. But the atmosphere couldn't have been more different. Michael sat in the place of honor at the dinner table, Hope on his lap, Faith sleeping in her carrier beside him. Rebecca glowed with the happiness of a woman who'd fought for her family and won. The babies wore matching red velvet dresses, their Christmas photos destined for the Foundation's newsletter and family album. A year ago, we almost lost everything, I said during my Christmas toast. We almost lost each other to suspicion, fear, and lies. But we learned something valuable. Family isn't just about sharing blood or last names. It's about choosing to stand together when everything tries to tear you apart. Michael's eyes met mine across the table, and I saw gratitude there, but also something deeper. Peace. The peace of a man who finally belonged exactly where he was meant to be. The Connor Michael Family Foundation had helped 47 families in its first year, providing legal aid, financial counseling, and emotional support to victims of corporate fraud. Michael and Rebecca split their time between running the foundation and expanding our logistics business, which had grown by 60% since the legal victory. But the real success was measured in smaller moments. Hope taking her first steps toward Michael, who'd been traveling for business but rushed home the moment Rebecca called. Faith saying, "Dada," for the first time during a board meeting, causing Michael to stop mid-presentation and grin like a teenager. Rebecca returning to work part-time, bringing both babies to the office because she refused to miss a moment of their development. Michael teaching Hope to play piano, Faith falling asleep to his terrible singing voice that somehow sounded perfect to his daughters. They're going to be spoiled, Rebecca warned one evening, watching Michael read bedtime stories in different voices for each character. Good, he replied without looking up from the book. They should know they're treasured. They should never doubt for 1 second that they're loved completely. The mansion had been renovated to accommodate the growing family. A nursery with hand-painted murals of Georgia peaches and New Jersey sunflowers, representing both parents' origins. A playroom with toys from around the world. A library where Michael planned to teach his daughters about business, literature, and the importance of fighting for what's right. Christmas morning brought gifts, laughter, and the kind of chaos that only comes from babies experiencing their first real Christmas. Hope tried to eat wrapping paper, Faith slept through most of the excitement, and Michael documented everything with the enthusiasm of a man making up for the childhood photos he'd never had. "What's your New Year's resolution?" Rebecca asked him as we cleaned up the aftermath of gift opening. "To make sure our daughters grow up knowing their story," Michael said. "Not just the happy parts, but everything. How we met, how we almost lost each other, how we fought to stay together. I want them to understand that love isn't just feeling, it's choosing, fighting, forgiving, and choosing again." The family business continued to thrive under their joint leadership. Michael's innovative strategies combined with Rebecca's traditional values created something neither could have achieved alone. They were invited to speak at conferences, featured in business magazines, and offered consulting contracts with companies around the world. But their favorite job remained the foundation work. "Every family we help teaches us something new," Rebecca explained to a reporter. "About resilience, about forgiveness, about the different ways people show love. We went through hell, but it made us stronger. If our pain can prevent someone else's suffering, then it was worth it." The reporter asked about their future plans. "More children, eventually," Michael said, bouncing hope on his knee. "A house with enough rooms for everyone to visit at once. Teaching our daughters that they can be anything they want to be, but they should always remember where they came from." "And personally?" Michael looked at Rebecca with the same wonder I'd seen in his eyes 5 years earlier. "Personally, I wake up every morning grateful that she took a chance on a stranger who fell in love with her photograph. I get to spend my life with the woman who believed in me when the evidence suggested she shouldn't. I get to raise children with someone who taught me that real strength comes from choosing to trust even when you're afraid." As the evening wound down, I found Michael in the nursery, rocking Faith while Hope played quietly in her crib. The room was lit only by a night light shaped like a star, casting gentle patterns on the walls. "Any regrets?" I asked. Michael considered the question seriously. "I regret the secrets. I regret the pain we all went through because I thought I could protect everyone by handling things alone. But the outcome? The family we became because of it? No regrets at all." Faith stirred in his arms, opening her eyes just long enough to see her father's face before settling back to sleep. "They'll never doubt where they belong," Michael whispered. "They'll never wonder if they're loved, if they're wanted, if they matter. They'll grow up knowing they were chosen before they were born, protected before they could protect themselves, celebrated from their first breath." As I watched this man who'd been an outsider become the center of our family, I understood something profound about love, trust, and second chances. Sometimes the people who fight hardest for your family are the ones who had to fight to become part of it. The Christmas lights outside twinkled against the snow, same as every year. But inside, everything was different. Better. Complete. What does family really mean to you? How has your definition changed over time? What legacy do you want to leave for the people you love? Share your thoughts below, because sometimes the greatest gifts come wrapped in the hardest struggles. If this story of love, betrayal, redemption, and new beginnings touched your heart, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories that remind us what really matters. Tell me in the comments which moment moved you most, the lockout that started everything, the courtroom victory, or the family they built from the ashes of suspicion. And remember, the strongest families aren't the ones that never face problems, they're the ones that choose to face problems together.